So we've talked a lot about what requirements organisations have with regards to legislation, culture, etc. But I know one of the key things that we get asked about a lot is how are we going to capture and manage the information that has come from our processes that we've put in place. So Greg, from a software perspective, you know, what are the key considerations that people are thinking about when they're implementing a system?
Yeah, I mean, you know, software can be the thing that makes your system work efficiently and effectively and really supercharge your system, or it can be the thing that makes it tedious and not work as efficiently or well as you could possibly want it to. So it's a really key consideration whenever you're thinking about, I'm implementing a whistleblowing system, how can it help me? I think there's some really easy wins when we think about software in terms of the deadlines and the reporting timelines and things that Sarah talked about earlier within legislation. It can really help with prompts. It can help with reminding people that they need to do things within certain timelines, and make sure that you're able to demonstrate that. You know, if enforcement ever does kind of catch up with the legislation, if someone wants to come in and have a look at, did you meet these deadlines? Did you do everything that your policies and procedures say that you did? Software is quite an easy way of being able to demonstrate that. You know, it's followed a specific policy and procedure. People aren't allowed to deviate from that. But again, you have to implement that correctly as part of your system. Something that lots of our customers talk about is anonymity and how you manage anonymity. So software can help with that. It can help protect someone's information. It can make sure that an anonymous person doesn't have to communicate via their email address or via in-person or via the telephone, where they might be recognized by their voice or whatever it may be. It can make sure that you're maintaining that, you're protecting them, they feel safe whenever they're communicating with you, and more importantly, protect that anonymity that the person has got. Investigations, again, is a really big part of where software can help. We have lots and lots of companies who come to us who want to train investigators to make sure that they're consistent, to make sure that they're applying the same principles whenever they're doing an investigation. Software can add further controls into that, because if they're using the same investigation software, that not only restricts what they should be doing or what they can see or what they can kind of access, but also just guides them, reminds them, presents the policy or procedure that you're following in an easy to understand way. We get lots and lots of investigators who are lumbered, for want of a better word, with a whistleblowing report that they have to investigate. It might be the first investigation they've ever done in their career. And if it's a whistleblowing report, you've got to get it right. So, you know, what software should do is it should enable people to do their function. It should enable them to be able to be more efficient. But of course, you still need the framework and the procedures and policies and everything else that sits behind that to ensure that you're compliant. The software won't make you compliant. You've got to make sure it's implemented correctly. One last thing on that is it removes the need to manage Excel spreadsheets. And I love Excel, you know me, Joe. But wherever reporting can be made easier is you know, such a time saver, and that's kind of where software and databases and things can be really useful. Yeah.
So Patrick, as a user of these sorts of systems, have you got any kind of like real examples of where software has or hasn't enabled you to do your job?
Well, so I think the most important thing, consistent with what Greg is saying, you have to commit as an organisation to take it on board, to ensure you've got the training in place, to have the follow-up training, you know, to really take it seriously as a tool. And once you have done so, I think it brings consistency in terms of board reporting. You can manage different forms of reports which can compare year on year, jurisdiction on jurisdiction, those sorts of things. And my experience of it is that once implemented, once used sensibly and thoughtfully, it can really enhance and facilitate conversations in the board and audit committee, because you've got data you can rely upon that's consistent and that is comparable with previous data. So, you know, once it's implemented well, it's great, but buying it thinking you're meeting an obligation and just leaving it on the shelf is a recipe for disaster, I thought.
And I think you're right though. I think having that kind of early thought about how to properly implement the system will save you a lot of time in the long run if it's done correctly, but there is that commitment up front to having to do that properly, and I think that that can't be underestimated really.
Yeah, it goes beyond cost, it's time as well, and that's, I suppose it's cost in a way, but yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that we do get asked a lot about is, well, you're handling lots of data, so what kind of considerations should we be making about that, the protection of that data? Any thoughts on that, Sarah?
Well, there's no specific data protection regulations which are applicable to whistleblowing, but obviously we are required in the UK to be compliant both with the GDPR under the Retain legislation and the Data Protection Act 2018. So as an employer, you need to be thinking about how you're processing your employees' data, particularly, including the requirement to provide fair processing information. And you'll also want to be thinking about what you're doing with that data. So how are you transferring, how are you protecting that data once you have it?
Great, thank you.